Angie Vakorja. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our first ever online summer gathering brought to you by the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. So I see people are here already. Hello from Somerset. Hi, Pauline. Ricky from Darkest Elmer's End. Hi, Maura from Ireland. We have Danielle. Lovely. Just type in where you're from. South Cheshire, lovely. Somerset, Minnesota, that's wonderful. Sunny Poland, lovely. Doncaster, Cork, Yorkshire, Wales, France, lovely. Brussels, Lincoln, Roma, ciao. London, Eastbourne, Sweden, lovely to see you. Wonderful. Great. So we have people from all over the world and it's just wonderful. So, and New Zealand, thank you for getting up so early. So, or maybe actually it's evening time. I can't remember. So listen, good morning to you, good evening to you, good afternoon to you, wherever you are in the world. It's just lovely to see you. So this time last year, I became chosen chief of the order. And because we couldn't meet, I was installed virtually. And I suppose throughout this year of COVID, the orders learned how to continue, even though many of us cannot meet physically. And as we approach the solstice, where the Northern Hemisphere basks in the longest day and the growing light, our fellows in the Southern Hemisphere are sheltering in the longest night and in winter. And many of us are looking forward to being physically present when we hope this pandemic ends soon. But we must remember that we continue to care for members of the order who are not blessed with Druid friends on their doorstep that they can meet physically. So if nothing else, COVID has forced us to become fluent in the technology that allows us to meet online, and to be able to invite people into this circle and this community that is this order. So we hope that when the worst of COVID is behind us, that at some way we will continue to have online connection. And we have members who are here, but not only members. So we have opened this up to people outside the order as well. And you are all so welcome. Usually our summer gathering are held in early June, so this is the first time that we're having one at the solstice. So it's wonderful to be here with you all at the height of summer. So I am going to hand you over to our Pendragon, Dave the Bard. Welcome, Dave.
Hello. Good to see you. How is everybody? This is quite remarkable, isn't it? I just want to say I've just been watching the comments, and it's really nice to see that the comment spammers have got up nice and early and they're already with us. If you see comments encouraging you to click on other links, which I am seeing occasionally going up the side of my page, don't click on them. They're just spammers, and the only place you're going to be able to watch this legitimately is through the Facebook page and the YouTube channel. So just ignore them, let them go up the page if that's what they're going to do. They'll get bored in the end, I hope. Other than that, welcome everybody. So I would like to do something for you that I do every time when we gather in Glastonbury at the town hall. And that is to reveal to you here, part of the role of Pendragon is the keeper of the Order's sword. And many of you may not know we have a sword, but this is the Order's sword right here. And when we are gathered in Glastonbury, we are gathered and the people are sitting in a large circle, 200 people sitting in a circle. We get people to stand up, and then I do what I'm just about to do, and I reveal the sword and I cast the Awen. And as the sword passes over the top of people's heads, so they begin the Awen chant. And basically it creates a cascading Awen chant with 200 voices, and we do 9 of them. So I'm going to do a similar thing, and I'd like to invite you to join in with me with the Awen. If you haven't done the Awen before, it's a monotone chant of the word Awen, divine inspiration, divine breath. and it's intoned in 3 syllables, R-U-N, in one long monotone. We won't do 9 because we're not all here and I can't get you all to cascade. Don't be self-conscious. If you want to do it, and then I will hand back to Ian. So imagine us all together, not all over the world, but actually together in one space, because that's where we are right now. And I'll step into the center of our circle, and I will say to you, behold this, our order's sword, drawn from the lake of still meditation and returned to it again, ever sharp and ever with us, should our lake be stilled. A blessing on our day together.
It was beautiful, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll see you tonight. We'll play some music. All right.
So we have a wonderful day for you. I'm going to now, in a few minutes, lead you in a meditation. And then at 10:30, Professor Ronald Hutton, is going to give a talk. And he is certainly worth listening to. And then at 11:30, we will take a break for half an hour. And then John Matthews will come on at 12 midday. At lunchtime, that's 1 o'clock, we will take a break for lunch. And then Penny Billington will give a talk at 2 o'clock. And then we take another break at 3 p.m. And then at 3:30, we will have our Alban Hevin celebration. And then we will take, for the early evening, a break. And then at 8 p.m., we will have our Eisteddfod. Fund. And remember, all those times are UK time. So let us start our meditation. So just get comfortable in front of your screens. And if you like, you can close your eyes and just go within. And just focus on your breath, breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. As you breathe in, remember, with every in-breath, there are possibilities. And with every out-breath, there's a letting go. Breathing in and breathing out. And I'd like you to imagine that you're in a forest. And notice the green trees and the many different colors around you. Feeling the earth beneath your feet. Sensing that connection with the earth. Feeling the energies of the earth travel up through you, up through your body. Up to the center of your being. And as you look up, you can see a beautiful blue sky above you. And draw down that sky energy, drawing it down into the center of your being. And feeling those two energies, the energy of the earth and the sky, meet in perfect harmony and balance within you, filling every cell of your body. And look around you and notice the textures and the colors. The different trees, the different leaves, the different plants and herbs all around you. And bring your awareness to the sounds that you can hear. The sounds of birds singing, maybe insects buzzing, the wind as it rustles through the leaves. And notice the smells. Smelling the greenness and the freshness of the forest around you. Maybe you can get that sense of the earth, that earthy smell, that wholesome earthy smell. There may be sense of flowers as well. And maybe you get a taste of the place. And you walk along a path that's ahead of you, through the forest, until you come to a clearing. And in that clearing is a tree. It's an oak tree, a grand, majestic oak tree. An oak tree in its prime, in full leaf. It's the summer solstice. But also, even at this time, there are acorns. And you walk up towards that tree and you greet the tree in all its majesty, and you feel its welcome. Feel its strength, feel its protection. Feel the wisdom of this tree. And then you sit down, if you wish, beneath this tree, maybe with your back to its trunk, deepening your connection with the earth, connecting with that tree, back to trunk, or maybe you wish to place your hands on the trunk, but really sense the energy of that oak tree. Feel yourself breathing with the tree. You're breathing in and out, in and out. And then you hear a rustle, and what falls into your hand is a small branch of oak leaves with acorns. This is a magical tree, even at the summer solstice. It's full of acorns. And you hold them in your hand. Feeling the wisdom and the strength of this oak. And remember, in that acorn is that splunk, that spark of potential. Holding that branch and acorn close to your heart, set an intention for yourself. What is it you would like to achieve this coming year? What do you want to grow? You have that spark of potential with you. And holding that branch and acorn close to your heart, you stand up and you give thanks to that mighty oak for its strength, its support, its wisdom, its magic, and its gift. And you see ahead of you another path that leads out beyond the clearing. And you continue to walk along that path, noticing the trees around you, feeling the strength and power of those trees, holding you, supporting you, giving you a sense of peace and calm, but also excitement. Anticipation for the year to come. And you begin to walk along until you come to the edge of the forest. And suddenly it's dawn. The sun is not yet up. And as you leave the forest, you're out on open grassland, and there before you, you see a stone circle. And you walk towards that stone circle. And you look around and see where you can enter. Where is the doorway for you to enter that stone circle? And now you're in that stone circle. And I ask you or invite you to turn towards the northeast, the place of the rising sun, the summer solstice. And then you feel the power of the stones around you, feeling the ancestors with you, those who held ceremonies a long time ago, as they too stood in that circle waiting for the sunrise at Greenstaden Towery, or Bulagan Towery, the belly of summer, the height of summer. And there you begin to see the first rays come up over the horizon. And you see the sun come through two standing stones that are in the northeast. And the sun rises higher and shines upon you. And you feel yourself bathed in that morning sun. And you hold up your oak and your acorn. And you declare to the sun what it is your intention is for the coming year. You feel the sun's energy filling you, filling every sense of your being. And notice the strength in your body, the confidence you have, the sense of calm, and how the sun energy mixes with the oak energy, becoming even stronger. And just bask in that sunlight, feeling healed and energized. And you're aware of the sun as it rises up into the sky. And the joy and the bliss that this brings. It's as if you want to stay there forever. You don't want to leave this magical, healing, calming place. But you know also that you must return. Return to the ordinary world. So you give thanks to the sun, knowing that the sun is always with you, even when you cannot see it. And you give thanks to these stones that have held the magic for centuries. And you begin to walk out of that circle, feeling the warmth of the sun on your back, still supporting you. And you come to the edge of the forest, and you look back one more time at that stone circle, knowing you can go back there whenever you wish. And you enter the forest and walk through the path until you come back to that clearing where the oak tree stands. And you hold those leaves, an acorn to your heart, and you absorb them into your being. That intention, that strength, that feeling of calm, and the blessings that you've received. And you look one more time at that majestic oak tree. And you give thanks. And you say goodbye, and you head on towards the other path. And you look back one more time at the oak tree, and you know again you can always come back here to visit this tree. So continue walking through the forest. And now you're at the edge. Allowing your awareness of the forest to fade as you become more aware of your physical body, here and now, sitting in front of your screen, but carrying with you all that you've received from the oak, the acorn, and the sun. They are now within you, being aware of the gratitude you have. So when you're ready, take 3 deep breaths. And in your own time, open your eyes back fully here and now. Back, aware of. Apologies for that. So, now I'm going to introduce our first speaker this morning. Sorry about that. Is Ronald Hutton. Ronald, you're very welcome. And before I invite you to speak, I'm going to just talk a little bit about you. I have to say you're in for a wonderful treat. I just love listening to Ronald. He can talk about anything. He doesn't talk about anything. He talks about really, really special topics that are of real interest to me. He's an absolutely wonderful speaker with a great sense of humor. So Ronald is a professor of history in the University of Bristol and a fellow with the Royal Historical Society. the Society of Antiquaries, the Learned Society of Wales, and the British Academy. And he is an historian on the board of trustees, which runs English Heritage. And he's chair of the Blue Plaque Panel, which awards commemorative plaques to historic buildings. He's published 16 books and 80 essays on a wide range of subjects, including British history from between 1400 and 1700, ancient and modern paganism in Britain, the British ritual year, and Siberian shamanism. And from the first OBOD camps, Ronald has been a great friend to the order. He has made great contributions to any gathering he's been, giving absolutely wonderful talks. So I'm going to hand you over to Ronald. You are so welcome.
Thank you very much indeed, Emma, for a perfect meditation, a perfect introduction, and perfect timing. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I do not have visual aids. I'm sure that Emma, who's a technical wizard, would have handled them beautifully, but it seemed to make things simpler not to use them. And indeed, there aren't any for some of the things that I propose to discuss. I'm concerned here with the place of sacred waters, in Britain in particular, partly because it's my own island and I know it best, and partly because many of the legends, sacred places, and monuments of Britain are particularly associated with the Druidic tradition, even though water, or at least particular bits of water, is sacred across the planet, covering all cultures and all continents. With the renewed recognition of the sanctity of nature in general, that is a feature of Druidry, there is a new realization in the present age of the power and beauty of natural waters. But we have, as yet, no proper history of them. As a historian, I'm going to try and sketch out the beginning of such a history now for Britain, from the earliest time to the present. It is the more needed because, in one sense, sacred waters are a timeless phenomenon found throughout history and prehistory. In another, they're especially important during particular periods and not at others. So let me show you what I mean. They can be called timeless because human beings seem to have been placing objects in water in a manner which suggests a ritual rather than a practical purpose, ever since Britain itself came into physical existence. This was, of course, at the end of the last ice age, when the land bridge to the continent of Europe broke to create this large island. The special deposits in water begin in the immediately succeeding period, the Middle Stone Age or Mesolithic. The people of that time were hunter-gatherers, including fishing in their repertoire. As well as other ritual activity, they seem to have placed offerings in special bodies of water. The most famous such place of activity is the site at Carr-Gomm in Yorkshire. That was a village on a lake into which the people built a jetty from which they threw many objects into the depths of the water. Some, such as animal bones, may possibly have been refuse, but others included valuable hunting weapons in perfect condition and antler headdresses, which were also completely intact. And these seem to have been offerings. The inescapable conclusion seems to be that even at this remote period, around 10,000 years ago, and soon after the island and its inland waters formed, some of those waters were considered holy. And the same pattern seems to persist with the arrival of farming and the New Stone Age. Many more Neolithic flints have been found in British rivers than can be explained simply in terms of accidental loss. They too look like offerings. Nonetheless, for most of British prehistory, there's no particular emphasis on water as a location for the sacred. Instead, ritual activity concentrates on the land, with masses of objects ceremonially deposited in pits, with elaborate burial costumes in graves, and the erection of spectacular monuments, such as our own beloved dolmens, barrows, and stone circles, so central to Druidry. The really big change came only near the end of prehistory, in the late Bronze Age and Iron Age. Then the monuments I've described were all abandoned, and burial ceased for centuries. Instead, watery places became the major and sustained foci of ritual for the first time. For the next 1,000 years, huge quantities of gorgeous metalwork were thrown into particular bodies of water. Weapons, armor, ornaments, and vessels, especially cauldrons. The same places also received lots of pottery and human and animal bones. The most poignant moment in the whole medieval Arthurian legend is perhaps that at the end of the cycle, when Sir Bedivere throws the sword Excalibur back into the lake from which it came. It is then received by the female spirit, the lady, who inhabits the lake. At first sight, a lake may seem a distinctly odd place from which to take or to which to return a sword. In reality, hundreds of prehistoric swords, often of very fine workmanship, have been found in British waterways, along with other kinds of weapon. Our own Order sword, kept by our Pendragon, was taken from the lake of meditation. But it seems that many more swords were chucked into lakes of meditation between 2,000 or 3,000 years ago than taken from them. The offerings are more likely to be religious in nature, in that they're only found in a few particular pieces of water in each part of Britain. They're abundant in a few rivers flowing east into the North Sea, through England and Scotland, the Thames, the Trent, the Welland, and the Tay. And they're also found in a few bogs and fens in the Midlands. They're found in small lakes in parts of Wales and the Scottish border region. And it's important to realise how many waters in Britain didn't get these lake prehistoric offerings. Most of the rivers flowing east through Britain, the Ouse, the Nene, the Tyne, the Tweed, and the Forth, did not. Moreover, none of those flowing west or south in Britain, including the Severn, the biggest of all, or the Bristol or the Wiltshire Avon, were given any, nor were most Welsh lakes, all those in the Lake District itself, and the pools and bogs of Dartmoor and Bodminmoor. Clearly, special rivers and pools alone were identified as spiritually charged by some long-lost process of revelation or tradition. Moreover, different offerings went into different places. Shields and cauldrons are mostly found in bogs, swords in rivers, and spears and body ornaments in both. The most prized kind of body ornament in late prehistory, however, was the famous twisted metal neck ornaments that were called torques. Our Pendragon has a particularly beautiful specimen. These were found buried in the earth in huge hoards that almost never appear in water. So again, there's a special kind of patterning going on here, The popularity of the custom also waxed and waned. It didn't happen all through late prehistory. The mass placement of objects in water appears around 1200 BCE or BC, flourishes until around 400, and then becomes much rarer. Until around 100 BCE, it starts up again massively, a new expansion which continues until the Romans arrive. Swords were the most famous item in the earlier period, and cauldrons in the later one. So what the heck is actually going on here? And why does later British prehistory become so fascinated with water? There are two possible explanations that stand out. One is economic, and the other is meteorological. The economic one is that the water hoards boomed during the first great periods of British metalwork, by definition, the Bronze Age and the Iron Age. Metal needs ore, and to get ore, you need to invent mining and trade. Bronze, in particular, is made of copper and tin, which only occur in a few special places in Britain and Europe. To sustain a metal-based economy, therefore, goods and products need to be moved around, often quite long distances. In that period, as in most until modern times, it was fastest and easiest to move things by boat. So water would have become the great medium by which the economy, and so prosperity, security, and prestige, were maintained. That's one very good reason for venerating it. The other is simply that there was much more water about in later prehistory than before. The climate changed. The climate of the British New Stone Age and early Bronze Age had been gloriously warmer than present, with hot summers and mild winters of moderate rainfall. It was equivalent to the south of France or the north of Italy at the present day. No wonder the British of this time were so fond of building large open-air monuments. They were sure they weren't going to get drowned or frozen while using them. From around 1500 BCE or BC, however, the planet unfortunately wobbled, and the climate got seriously colder and wetter. It became equivalent to that of southern Scandinavia at the present. The effect on the landscape was devastating, as the soil, which humans had now largely cleared of trees, washed away. The moors of Devon and Cornwall, the barren mountains of Wales and the Scottish Highlands, the sandy heaths of southern England and the Breckland of Norfolk, and the great marshes we call the fens, all formed at this time from what had been fertile farmland. It makes sense, therefore, for the people of this age to have come specially to honour the element which kept falling from the sky and drowning parts of their environment. Once again, however, it must be emphasised that only special bits of water were chosen, and they were treated in specific ways. So let's look now more closely at just two very famous examples of such late prehistoric sacred waters in Britain. By doing so, perhaps we can get closer to the ancient experience of them. The first is Llancerrig a small lake on the major Welsh island of Anglesey, or Mon. In the Second World War, an airfield was being constructed next to it, so that fighter pilots could fly more sorties. A tractor driver working on the site broke a tow rope and then saw a chain sticking out of the mud on the side of the lake. This proved ideal for his purpose, and at the end of the job, he showed it proudly to his supervisors. They thought it looked strange and sent it off to the National Museum of Wales. There it was identified as over 2,000 years old, having been designed to shackle slaves. The site was hastily excavated and 90 more metal objects found, along with a mass of animal bones. The metalwork turned out to have come from a great span of territory, extended from Ireland to Kent at the southeast of England. It and the bones had been thrown into the lake from a small cliff over a period of half a millennium, from the 4th century BCE to the 1st century CE or AD. We're therefore looking at a series of small acts of offering, either by the local people or by pilgrims. Part of the lake is still there, and the airfield is now RAF Valley, where amongst others, Prince William, the current Duke of Cambridge, has served. The other site is Flag Fen, an area of drained farmland just east of Peterborough in the East Midlands of England, where in 1982, archaeologists noted bits of ancient metalwork sticking out of the sides of the drainage ditches. Led by the flamboyant Viking-like TV archaeologist Francis Pryor, they then dug out 300 pieces of metalwork with shale bracelets and bits of pottery. These were, however, only a sampling of the site, and the total number of objects still there is probably more like 3,000 to 5,000. They were put into a channel of shallow water between a mainland and a small island between 1200 and 200 BCE. That's 1,000 years of constant existence. Many had been broken beforehand, either ritually to kill their spirits or to stop thieves going to the trouble of retrieving them. They were also part of a monumental landscape. For a line of about 2,000 large oak posts, oaks again, Druids, had been driven into the channel in which they were laid. The objects had been left on one side of the posts, the southern side. The posts themselves had more offerings around their bases, including loose human bones and the bodies of dogs. And the posts themselves had been put up over a span of 400 years, and the offerings still made for almost 7 centuries after that. So this is an immensely important and long-lived site. Peterborough Council turned it into a heritage centre, which for 10 years was the best place to go in Britain to study the late Bronze Age. But even in this one place, very different explanations can be offered for the activities carried on there. The line of posts could have been oriented in some heavenly body. So this could have been a cult linked to the sun, or the moon, or the stars, or all of them. Alternatively, it could have been a marker for some great event in the past, like a religious revelation, a battle, a technical discovery, or an inauguration of a beloved leader. It could have been a consecrated barrier to mark a tribal territory, or to hold back the waters from drowning the nearby land, which in the end they did. It could have been a funeral monument with a new post planted to mark each special person being commemorated there, and that's where the human bones would have come from. And all these possibilities are equally plausible. Looking at the wider question of sacred waters in prehistory, a similarly wide range of explanations can be suggested for the cults carried on there. One is that they were funeral rites to accompany bodies placed in the water, which have now mostly disappeared. It's true that where you get water hoards, you rarely get contemporary graves on land, but often human bones in the water. Over 100 skulls have been found in the River Thames at London alone. It's also possible that the offerings were made to specific deities or spirits believed to dwell in those patches of water. Or the water could have been seen as a portal to another world through which deities and spirits in general might be contacted. It might have marked a boundary on the edge of tribal or clan land to be consecrated so its attendant spirits would repel invaders. Traders and travelers might have offered to water spirits in order to seek their protection before going on river or sea journeys. And the goods deposited might have been thrown away by tribal leaders to prove their wealth, especially if looted from rival peoples. This sort of behavior is recorded elsewhere in the world. They may have been associated with some particular dead individuals whose ghosts might return to haunt the owners if their possessions weren't ritually discarded. It might even be the general location was the important factor and not the element of water. An ancient Greek traveller among the neighbouring peoples of Gaul, now France, noted that at sanctuaries the locals threw offerings into a pool, but also piled them up on the land nearby. Over the centuries, those on the land were looted, those in the water survived. These explanations are not incompatible, and a number could have operated at once in the same place, or different reasons could have obtained in different places. We shall probably never know. This is the great frustration and the great freedom when analysing prehistoric religion. We're individually free to see what we wish in it. Now, after that rousing statement, it would be just great if I could carry on smoothly from prehistory to the present, showing how prehistoric sacred waters were first Romanized and then Christianized, and so became the holy wells of the historic period. This would provide a reassuring organic continuity between the Iron Age and the New Age. This was something for which the Victorian and Edwardian scholars, shocked by the disrupting discontinuities of urbanization and industrialization, deeply yearned. Their writing still exerted a considerable influence in the mid-20th century, with such assumptions as that of a pagan temple underlying every medieval parish church, and pagan deities transforming into Christian saints. The concept of the timeless Celtic holy well was a part of this British package. Unfortunately, and inconveniently, things seem to be a lot more complicated than that. The complications start as soon as the Romans arrive, and with them the beginning of recorded history in Britain. At first sight, the continuities between prehistoric and Roman seem obvious. Both the native British and their imperialist conquerors were ancient pagans. Both venerated holy wells, and both believed that rivers and lakes had personifying spirits. The Romans developed spectacular examples of sacred waters within their province of Britannia, which remain noted sites for visitors at the present day. The most celebrated of all is the sacred spring at Bath, the centre of its Roman baths museum complex and of the spa which developed at Bath in the early modern period. Bath, after all, confronted the Romans with a rare and wonderful phenomenon of a natural spring which pumps out thousands of gallons of comfortably hot water every day. This made a natural Roman focus for both a huge civic bathing amenity and a religious cult. The cult concerned showed a clear continuity between prehistoric and historic. because it was of a native British goddess associated with the spring, called Sulis. The Romans twinned her with their own leading goddess, Minerva, patroness of war, healing, crafts, and wisdom. They gave both together an imposing rectangular stone temple of the classic Mediterranean kind, with a pillared portico and a high altar in an open square in front. This and the spring attracted huge numbers of pilgrims who left offerings. In the 2nd century, the spring was covered over to create a shadowy and mysterious space. It could now be approached only down a long and narrow passage, so that people had to worship there alone or in pairs to heighten the religious intensity of the experience. It's usually assumed the focus of the cult was mostly on healing, because of the medicinal quality of the waters, which produced the later spa. Also, as said, that was one aspect of the goddess Minerva's qualities. However, all the surviving evidence testifies to a fiercer character for the joint goddess. None of the 130 inscribed lead tablets found in the spring at Bath mentions healing. Instead, they all call down the anger of Sulis Minerva on enemies or criminals. No votive offerings of the kind usually concerned with healing, such as miniature body parts, have been recovered from the spring at Bath. Instead, we find a miniature Roman war catapult. It seems that the subterranean heat, which raised the temperature of the water, indicated anger and aggression in the goddess responsible for it. The other site is at the other end of Roman Britain, being the springs of the goddess Coventina, outside the fort at Carr-Gomm on Hadrian's Wall. Now a lonely place on a wild moorland, it attracted intense devotion from all ranks serving at the Roman fort. It had beautiful carved reliefs of the goddess and her attendant nymphs, and 13 altars. Into the water were thrown 1,600 coins, precious jewelry, figurines, and the pins that poorer people used to clasp their cloaks. Another cult of a Roman British goddess, which developed into a modern spa town, was at Buxton in the Peak District. Verbea was honoured as the goddess of the River Wharfe in Yorkshire, and a goddess with the lovely name of Bellissima, the glittering one, as the goddess of the River Ribble in Lancashire, while the River Tyne, up in the northeast of England, was thought to have a god. Aquatic deposits continue to be made at significant places. For example, if you're going to put a highway across a river with a bridge, you need to make sure the river doesn't resent it and wreck it. One of these places was Pierce Bridge, where Ermine Street, now the A1 road, the main Roman road from London to Hadrian's Wall, crossed the River Tees. Divers have recovered 2,000 objects from the water there, spanning the whole Roman British period. They include coins, rings, brooches, and images of various deities. An even larger haul of Roman objects has been recovered from the Thames at London, in just the same stretches of it where the prehistoric metalwork and the ancient skulls were found. So, what's my problem? Why do I have an issue with the idea of complete, straightforward continuity? Well, it's largely because the Thames is one of the few places where offerings went on directly from pre-Roman to Roman times. Llymcerrig-Bach, that lake in Anglesey, was also given offerings for a short while after the Romans came. But elsewhere, the waters revered in prehistory were mostly neglected. Instead, new watery cults developed under the Romans. There's no definite evidence for worship, even at the bath spring, before the Romans arrived. A few Iron Age coins were found there, but they may have been offered after the Romans came. Coventina doesn't seem to have been a British goddess, as she's found more often on the European continent. She seems to have been brought to Hadrian's Wall by the soldiers serving, taken from the continent. The Romans themselves had holy wells and rivers, and they brought that form of worship with them. So the custom persisted, but the old native sacred waters were mostly abandoned. The tradition of placing valued objects reverently in water itself lasted until the very end of paganism in Britain. In this case, the time was as late as the 9th century of the Christian era, but the pagans concerned were not survivors from ancient Britain or Roman Britain, but newcomers and invaders from the north. They were, of course, the Vikings. These arrived from Scandinavia and settled thickly in parts of northern and midland England. They were quite rapidly converted to Christianity, at most within 100 years. But before they did so, they left their mark on the aquatic landscape. At home in Norway and Denmark, these same Vikings had a long tradition of leaving objects in special waters, just as the British and the Irish, and indeed most Europeans, had done. Once over in Britain, they just carried on with it. Many Viking swords have been found in English rivers, too many to be explained by accidental loss. On the River Hull in East Yorkshire, a jetty was built and was consecrated with a classic foundation deposit placed underneath, a sword with cattle, dogs, horses, and tools. So the same instinct and ritual continued, but not carried on by the same people or in the same places. And a similar problem attends Christianization itself, a process which began in Britain before the Romans left it and went on far into the Middle Ages. Hundreds of wells were consecrated to saints in the medieval period, and it's easy to assume that they were sites of pagan reverence. But the evidence for that is almost wholly missing. Just one well in Low Leighton in Essex has yielded evidence both of pagan votive offerings and a later saints cult. And it may be that the people who founded the saints cult were completely ignorant of the former presence of the pagan cult. A dozen more medieval English holy wells are either associated with some activity from the pagan Roman or Anglo-Saxon periods, which may or may not have been religious, or else they have early place names. But even if we include all of them together as possible pagan holy sites, a dozen is not a large proportion of almost 900 medieval holy wells in England during the Middle Ages. The ruins of Roman Bath were reoccupied by English monks in the 7th century, and a notable abbey, the great church of which is still there, founded near the former spring of Sulis Minerva. There does not seem, however, to be either any material or any textual evidence for a religious cult of the spring itself, or in any part of the Middle Ages. It looks as if in this respect, as in many others, Christianity did not so much directly appropriate the deities and holy places of the religions which it replaced, so much as offer a series of parallel services and holy places, even though often in similar forms. The map of medieval holy wells in England is, frankly, actually rather a weird one, with most of them in Yorkshire and the Midlands, and fewest in the southeast and East Anglia. Now, this is not a chart of Celtic influence, population density, pagan practices and place names, or even of Wales in general. I simply can't explain it, and I don't know anybody who can. What does seem certain is that the popularity of sacred wells grew throughout the Middle Ages. Evangelical Anglo-Saxon clergy had often denounced cults of wells as pagan, but these condemnations decreased with time, while the dedication of wells to saints steadily increased. The saints chosen were simply the most popular at the time concerned. There weren't any particularly concerned with water, nor were most of the wells associated with healing. They were purely shrines to saints, where people could go who didn't fancy entering a church, or for whom the church was too far away. Likewise, rivers continue to be used as repositories for ritual deposits, but not in the same places usually, or of the same kind as before. For example, the metal badges obtained by pilgrims to show they'd visited famous saints' shrines were regarded as powerful sacred objects in their own right. As such, they were fixed up in houses, cowsheds, and beehives to protect the occupants, but they were also dropped into wells and river crossings. This was presumably to keep the wells pure and make the rivers safer. Most remarkably, a study of the River Witham in Lincolnshire has revealed that the deposition of valuable metalwork continued there for most of the Middle Ages. Continuity is here for once the correct word, because objects were placed in that river in prehistory, and again in Roman times, and again in those of the Anglo-Saxons. Specifically, they were placed at well-used fords and along the causeways leading to those fords. The Witham's a dangerous river, traditionally, prone to flash flooding. So fords and the causeways leading to them were places that needed consecration and protection. And from the 11th century, the last Anglo-Saxon century, the first Norman century, the rate of deposition slowly increased, most of the objects being weapons such as swords, daggers, axes, and spearheads. They were laid in the river on either side of the fords or in pools next to the fords. This practice went on to the 14th century, spanning the whole of the centre of the Middle Ages. And in places, the quantity of metalwork left exceeded that from prehistory or Roman times. So are we looking at a surviving pagan warrior cult going on deep into Christian times in a remote valley of the Lincolnshire uplands? Sadly, almost certainly not, because the valley concerned wasn't remote at all at that period. It contained 10 wealthy and powerful monasteries, to each of which the river crossings concerned led. And the deposition practice grew with the power and riches of the religious houses. It seems as if somehow we're looking at a practice fully integrated into the Christianity of its time. The most telling feature of the tradition is that it seems to have fallen off when the practice grew up of hanging the weapons of dead aristocrats around their tombs as part of the decoration of the tombs. Before then, the arms were put on the funeral bier and carried with the coffin towards the tomb, and they'd then be removed and thrown away before the interment in the tomb. It seems likely the custom grew up in Lincolnshire of ritually placing the discarded weapons of the dead man in the river as the funeral procession crossed it, going up towards the monasteries where the dead person was going to be buried. We don't know how much memories of ancient pagan practice may have influenced the growth of this local tradition, or whether the discovery of prehistoric weapons in the river had sparked off the idea. We can say, however, and the perceptive of you will probably already have got here, that the charismatic legendary moment when Bedivere throws Excalibur into the lake may have reflected contemporary medieval funeral practice as much or more than it did ancient memories. Once again, our order sword, taken from the still lake of meditation, has a very long continuity of ritual reference points. The Protestant Reformation put paid to the cults of saints across most of Britain, and so that of holy wells largely came to an end in response. Alternatively, however, the cults may have been transformed rather than suppressed. And I'm saying this because from the 17th century onward, a new interest developed in the same medieval wells, still bearing their saints' names, but as centers of healing rather than worship, because the cults of the saints were forbidden. Some of those wells actually did and do have beneficial minerals in the water, but most don't. But they were still credited with particular healing powers in popular tradition. These were no longer associated explicitly with the saint concerned, and their saint was not venerated. Nonetheless, the cures claimed still often partook of the miraculous rather than the medicinal. So in some sense, even in the mainstream of Protestant Britain, 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, these waters were still sacred. And new holy wells continue to be recognized up to the present day, some of them becoming very important sacred centers and drawing many pilgrims on an international scale. The most beloved of these, probably the most beloved to the order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, and I admit my own favourite, is the Chalice Well at Glastonbury. That spring certainly has a remarkable physical quality of dyeing everything over which it flows for long enough a livid red, or rather orange, because of the iron which it contains. The holy well of medieval Glastonbury was, however, St. Joseph's, in the grounds of the great medieval abbey. The Chalice Well was regarded simply as an extra source of fresh water until the 1880s, when it became part of the garden of a Catholic priest seminary for training new priests. This was a period in which interest in the Arthurian legend was undergoing a great revival in England, with Lord Tennyson's poetry and the paintings of the pre-Raphaelites. The story appeared in the 1880s that the Holy Grail had been hidden in the great hill above the well, Glastonbury Tor. The red deposit of the water was said to be a token of Christ's holy blood, and that established the well as a Christian holy place of growing sanctity by 1900. In the 20th century, the devotion paid to it steadily increased, and people began to regard it as a pagan holy place before Christianization, perhaps sacred to a or the goddess. The old stonework around it was thought to be Bronze Age. From the 1960s, however, excavation has revealed that the stonework was actually the top of a medieval well house built by the Glastonbury monks, which had apparently been buried by a landslide from the Tor. Now, some Roman pottery has been found nearby, and some Neolithic post holes, but the well itself has none of the deposits associated with prehistoric or Roman or medieval ritual activity. In terms of the present power of the place, I personally think that this is irrelevant. The Chalice Well is now indubitably a major and genuine sacred site. In particular, it has a valuable ecumenical dimension in that it attracts equal veneration from Christians and pagans of all kinds and followers of Oriental religions, and often at the same time, and of course attracts it from us, being, apart from much else, the traditional setting of the order's midwinter morning ceremony at the gathering. All these traditions are united there by the common recognition of the power of sacred water to move the heart and inspire the mind. And in recent years, a second spring across the road, known now as the White Spring, has been developed as a rival or complementary focus for spiritual experience. A complete temple has been built around it to allow for a more intimate and private encounter with the spirits of place than that obtained now at the open air and often rather crowded Chalice Well. In this, it reminds me of the Roman treatment of the spring of Sulis Minerva at Bath to enclose it and make it more private, personal, mysterious, and numinous. So, to conclude, one of the glories of being a Druid today is the sheer richness and variety of the past heritage on which we can draw to inform and reinforce our own practices. What I hope I have done in the case of British sacred waters is to show that the same richness and variety exists there as well. And what I say is, I think, is true of most other lands. Every great age of the British past has turned to sacred water, but in different ways, in different degrees, and often in different places. So we are free now in making the future to choose our own relationship with them as we claim our place on this mighty stage, which is not just the sacred earth, but sacred water as well. Thank you for having heard me out so patiently on this morning together. I now invite questions.
Thank you, Ronald. That was absolutely wonderful. So there have been lots of questions, and I don't know if we're going to have time to answer all of them. And there have been wonderful, positive comments from your talk. There's one from Marjolein in the Netherlands. Is the Roman goddess Nahel Enya, also known in Britain? She's in the Netherlands, who kept sailors that travelled from the Netherlands to England safe.
The answer, alas, is, as far as I know, there are no recorded ascriptions to Nehelenia in Britain, but I know of her immense importance in the Roman Netherlands and Batavia. And I have myself enormously enjoyed a night ritual to Nehelenia at the OBOD Netherlands gathering some years ago. So she's a goddess of whom I'm very fond, and I wish there were more of her in Britain too.
Oh, wonderful. One question is, you were to go back to the swords found in the rivers, from Janet. Where are the swords found in the Trent? That's one question. And are they usually broken?
They're found at many different places in the Trent. It's a very sword-heavy river from Staffordshire all the way up to Yorkshire. And they are usually intact, possibly because the depth of the river meant that thieves were unlikely to try and get them out again once they are in, or partly because in some way they were thought to live on spiritually in the river. I'm
struck myself, you know, I hadn't realised, or that hypothesis that they were broken in order to prevent thievery. What about all the jewellery and things like that were found in the river? What would have stopped those?
That's often damaged as well, deliberately. But again, we're not sure why.
Okay.
There are many different explanations. That's the great thing about prehistory.
It certainly is. This is from Xenia. Can you say something about veneration of Isis in London? And I think she says there's an Isis temple in London, maybe, and the connection between Isis and the Thames.
It's always lovely to hear from Xenia. The evidence for the cult of Isis in London is offerings to it, which are found in the south of London. We haven't yet found the temple. Sooner or later we may. We found the temple of Mithras, another great mystery religion, but not yet Isis. And Isis was also worshipped at York, the main Roman city in the north, where again dedicated offerings are found. The connection with the Thames is hazier. In the Victorian period, it was proposed that the Roman name for the river, Tamesis, contains the name of the goddess Isis in it. And something of a Victorian literary cult of Isis developed at Oxford, which is, of course, the first city on the river. And as any Oxonian student knows, the local name for the river at the university is the Isis. Those who try rowing on it know what a powerful river it can be and how nice it is to have it on your side. But there isn't ancient evidence yet of a connection between the river and the goddess.
Okay, thank you. There's a question from Kieran Sibley. Water spirits that live in sacred springs, what's your personal favourite? There's one in Glastonbury Abbey's Well that's very strong, and mist comes from it in the evening.
Always lovely to hear from Kieran. He's one of my people.
Yes.
I'm very much a stick in the mud, old-fashioned. I adore the Chalice Well. I've known the Chalice Well since I was 12 years old and have never stopped going there. I've known it in all seasons. I've known it in many rituals. So that has my first loyalty. But there are a few other around the landscape. There's the so-called Virtuous Well, which is near the village of Trelec, the village of the Three Stones in Monmouthshire, across the River Severn from my city of Bristol. And it's a medieval well that has been beautifully restored in the 1990s. And it's become a cult centre again, with increasing clouties offerings hung on the tree which hangs over the well. But I've never seen anybody else there. It's a very private, solitary place with an utter peace to it, which I think is perfect for the kind of vigils and solitary rituals which one can't carry on so easily at a well-known venue.
Thank you. There's a question, a question here from Neve. Are there many instances in Britain of trees with knowledge granting fruit at bodies of water, or is it more unique to Ireland? For example, the River Boyne origin story. She also says, thank you for an excellent talk.
I'd never come between my friends the Irish and a good legend. There isn't a British equivalent of which I know. I occasionally hear the Irish legend of the Well of Shagash transplanted to particular waters in Britain in modern times. But as far as I know, and I'm very happy to be corrected on this by John Matthews, if necessary, I haven't come across it myself.
Okay. There's Janet. Any connection with the current practice of dressing wells common all over the Peak District? And she says these wells are delivering old water rather than raining down. Recently, they come out of old rock.
Well dressing in the Peak District is a magnificent and extremely beautiful regional custom that grew up in the 18th, 19th century. And it seems to have been a transplantation of the medieval idea of icons, of sacred pictures, once they'd been forbidden in churches by the Protestant Reformation. And there are equivalent customs abroad in parts of Europe. But in Britain, the Peak District takes the honour of being the focus for this. It's a post-Reformation custom, but all the more beautiful and valuable and distinctive for that.
Okay, thank you. Francis has a question. Ronald, do you feel one of the reasons swords and jewellery was thrown into the river could be because they were offered to deceased ancestors and warriors in the underworld?
Yes, absolutely right, with the water concerned being a portal to that other world or underworld, as water often is in the sacred imagination. That's certainly one of various different possible explanations.
Has there everything, I think it's Sims, it's pronounced, has there ever been anything found in the River Dart in Kent?
Not as far as I know, which is a shame, as I'm very fond of it. I'm heartbroken in many ways that there are no offerings found in my beloved western rivers, so many in Cornwall, Devon, Somerset, Gloucestershire, or Mother Sabrina herself, the mighty Severn, which flows from the core of Wales through so many counties and divides much of Britain. Not a single object. Or the Avon, the river that flows into it through my city of Bristol, right through Bath and collects the sacred waters from Sulis Minerva Spring. Not a scrap found anywhere in these rivers.
Oh, do you have a book that you could recommend? Somebody's asked about a guide to sacred waters and wells.
As I've said, there isn't a history of them. I've scratched together one for you. I don't recommend anybody to buy my own books. They've left home, they're responsible for themselves. And anyway, they're probably easily obtained through public libraries. But my book, Pagan Britain, published in 2013, has in its various different component parts most of the information that I've supplied today. There's been no really major discoveries in the last 7 or so years since.
Okay, a question from Wendy. Hi, Wendy Shrubshall. Is there no evidence other than Roman for worship of the Severn?
There doesn't seem to be. No, we know the Romans believed that the Severn had an indwelling goddess, Sabrina. And there actually was a Roman sacred site to Sabrina at Blackrock, which is on the Monmouthshire side of it. And that's simply because it's where the ferry from what became England terminated for people crossing over to Wales. So for frightened Romans, being ferried across this extremely temperamental tidal river, the urge to say thank you, Sabrina, on docking at the Black Rock would be a good reason for throwing in coins. That's why coins have been found there. But nothing else in the rest of the river, even though it's very well dredged, and what's in it should have come up higher upstream.
It's wonderful. Someone suggests, this is Marianne, time to start a new book on sacred waters, Professor Hutton. Anyway, no pressure.
I'll leave that to somebody else. I don't want to hog a wonderful subject. I've written a lot of it in Pagan Britain. Now it's time for somebody to take up the baton and do things with it that I never could.
Do you know why it's east-flowing rivers that were revered?
No, there are all sorts of guesses. It's not just east-flowing rivers, it's only a few east-flowing rivers. And they're very, very special. There's a tendency in the Iron Age to revere the East and the South. So the average Iron Age roundhouse always has its entrance in the South to the East. And that could be because the rising and noonday sun was particularly revered. Or it could simply be that the worst weather in these islands comes from the north and the west. And so you don't want to put your entrance to anything facing it. you want to face the sun, so you get some natural heating. And it could be as a result, the east was considered a lucky direction. But that still leaves us with the problem of why so many of the great rivers flowing east into the North Sea in Britain don't have any finds.
It's fascinating. Lots more to look at and explore. We've come to the end. There's a number of people have asked if they could have a hard copy of your talk.
I'm so sorry. I'm so primitive. I spoke not from a finished script, but from a lot of jotted together notes, and so there isn't really one. But it has been recorded and will stay up for a while. So if you want to take your own notes from that, you're welcome to do so.
And also, I ask that you don't share this talk on social media. It will be up for a number of weeks, and then we will be taking it down. So if you want to watch it again, watch it sooner rather than later. So I want to thank you, Ronald. This has just been an absolutely amazing morning, and the comments are just flowing in adulation of your what would you say, your erudition and your attention to research. I also love, this is something you've spoken about before, that sometimes people get caught in, well, this isn't an ancient tradition, it's modern, so therefore it is of no value. And I always like, that even if it isn't ancient, if it is practiced now, it is still of value. And I think that's very important.
Thank you. As Druids, we were put here not just to revere and preserve the past, but to create the future. So it's up for us now to equal our ancestors in what we can produce.
I think that's absolutely, what a lovely way to end this part of our gathering. Thank you so much, Ronald. Thank you all for listening. We're going to take a break now, so I'm going to end the broadcast, and then we'll go on the air at 12 midday, where I will be introducing you to John Matthews for another wonderful talk. So till 12, enjoy your break, and thanks again, Ronald. Thank you so much. This was absolutely wonderful. So goodbye until later. Slán go fóill.